Jacobin at 15 Blanco Road, number 115 and 116, Castle Hills, Texas, 78213. More particularly described as CB 5004, block 174, lot 2, as found in the real property records of Bexar County, Texas, to allow for the continued use for the property to perform permanent makeup services.
Hello.
Hi, if we can have you wait to the next agenda item.
Oh,
This is
okay.
just a public hearing for
Sorry.
everybody else. I appreciate your excitement, though. Yes, sir, I sure will. It is 6:45 and we're going to open the public hearing. We have anybody that would like to speak? If we don't, then we will close the public hearing at 6:45 and move on to item 6.2. Discussion of possible action on ordinance number 2022-11-08 on an application request for a special use permit from Laura Jacobin at 7115 Blanco Road, 1EB 5004, block 174, lot 2, as found in the real property records of Bexar County, Texas, to allow for the continued use to perform permanent makeup services. Council, this is something that we've seen happen regularly, and I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you willing to come into compliance. We have a motion. Mr. May,
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance number 2022-11-08, granting a special use permit as stated.
thank you, Mr. May. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Mr. Paul, you have a question?
Was this a referral for us when we were coming
Yes, Mr. They recommended approval.
asking for, should we not ask for approval of?
Go ahead, Mr. Schnall. But-
In this instance, Mr. Paul, since Mr. May made a motion to adopt the ordinance that encompasses the recommendation from the zoning commission. So we don't need anything further than the motion to adopt the ordinance and the second by, I think, Mr. Joyce.
Mr. Isbrand.
I'd just like to make an observation here. This is probably the third or fourth time within the past year, and this requires the applicant to go through the zoning process. You all are well aware of, what that is like for zoning to hold a hearing, to make a recommendation, to bring it to us, whether we act on it. And I believe the last time this came up, I suggested then, and I'd still like to suggest that perhaps at the appropriate time, it would be good to have an agenda item that we ask the zoning commission to look at whether permanent makeup services should be a the quote prohibited business that it currently is, that then requires an SUP, but rather to remove it from that status to be a normal business, so that these applicants don't have to come to us time and time again, and each and every time they receive approval of this. So I hope we'll think about asking the zoning commission to take a look at this longer term.
Thank you, Mr. Isbrand. Ms. Daines.
I believe they're considering permanent makeup similar to tattooing, or it's under tattooing.
Mr. Rapley, can we lower that mic, please? Thank you, Ms. Daines. This is something that I had mentioned to Mr. Schnall before, and I know that he was trying to work through the vernacular, and I don't know if we can separate it, but I'm sure if we can, he'll bring it to us when he can. So thank you for that. We have a first and we have a motion and a second. Do all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, next up, we have discussion of possible action authorizing the city manager to advertise for requests for qualifications for municipal engineering services. Mr. Rapley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm requesting authorization to go out for proposals, RFQs for municipal service, for engineering service. I believe the last time City of Castle Hills did this actually precedes my time here almost 5 years ago. I believe in the fall of 2017. And so we will go out for RFQs. We currently have 4 on-demand engineers. And so it's best practices to go out every 5 years for engineers. And so I think what we'll do over the next 30 to 45 days is get the RFQ and get it back to y'all probably around January's timeframe
Thank you, Mr.
for
Rathway.
selection.
Thank you. Mr. Isbrand.
Mayor and council, I'd move that we authorize the city manager to advertise for request of qualifications for municipal engineering services.
We have a motion by Mr. Isbrand, a second by Mr. May. Do we have any discussion? No discussion. I think this is a good idea. Hopefully we can get the best and brightest as we move on with the new round of infrastructure improvements that we should find out about here shortly. All that being said, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. Next up, we have discussion and possible action on the position or appointment of a city treasurer. As we had discussed, this has come up before. My urgency in putting this on the agenda again was because tonight we should know whether or not we're going to be able to proceed with the next round of street improvements. And it's essential for that, for our accreditation or credit ratings, that we are in compliance with our standards and have a city treasurer as is a part of the city council. That doesn't preclude us from changing our policy, because that's not a state requirement, that's a Castle Hills requirement, Mr. Schnall, if I'm correct. So the idea, in my opinion, would be for us to appoint somebody tonight so that we could be in compliance and move forward with the next round of streets, if that is the direction that the voters would like for us to move. I remain resolute in my opinion that I think Mr. Paul would be a good candidate, and I've asked him and he is interested and willing in doing that additional service to the city. Entertain any motions or questions, comments? Mr. May.
Mr. Mayor, in that case, I am proud to nominate Mr. Frank.
Thank you, Mr. May. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Do you have a comment? Mr. Isbrand.
Mayor and council, when this last came up at our I believe it was last month's meeting, we asked that the investment policy be brought forward this meeting so we could have discussion about whether the provision in it that says that it must be a member of council could be discussed by us. So I guess we're not going to have that discussion tonight. And Mr. Paul well knows that I have complete confidence and, support for him in this role. Last month, I talked about, institutional knowledge. And I think if there's anyone up here who has the kind of institutional knowledge that we need in a city treasurer, that's Mr. Paul. But the one thing that gives me pause about this is to ask myself, what is in the best interests of the city? And we wrote into that investment policy that it must be a member of council. Is it in the best interest of this city that we preclude anyone else in the city from being considered, and that one of us has to do it? And if we're not going to discuss the investment policy tonight, I am disappointed in that, because I think if we are agreed that we don't want to change the policy, that's fine, and we can move forward. But to not even have the discussion, I think does a disservice to the community by not considering all the talented, skilled people in this community who might potentially have an interest in doing this. We are precluding them from stepping forward to offer their service to the city. And that's all I would say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Isbrand. I'm not opposed to changing the policy. I think we have a lot of talented people that could provide that service as well. I think we can decide that at the upcoming council meeting, hopefully in December, if everything's on track.
Well, Mayor, Council, I think from our perspective, and Mr. Schnall can add to it because we discussed it, that we would actually have to present that on the agenda to discuss the investment policy if that was an option, correct? And if that is council's desire to augment or change the investment policy, then that would be direct council action. This has just been set up to appoint or discuss the position of an appointment. I did put in front of the dais there, the Public Investment Act there that talks about that one or more officers or employees of state agency, local government, or investment pool as investment officer to be responsible for its investment funds. That actually was brought forward by Ms. Wallace, who helps us with our financial consulting. She gave us her opinion there in the red font that talks about the only reference that she can find is being an officer of an employee or city being designated as the investment officer, or if we wish to contract with someone for that investment services. So, Mr. Schnall.
But that's about the investment advisor as
Opinion.
opposed to the city treasurer. I think the reason that this should be acted on this evening was best articulated by the mayor in his introduction, that assuming, for the sake of this discussion, that after the votes are counted from today's election, the city is authorized to proceed with the issuance of certificates of obligation, then it is important to have a person named as city treasurer. That does not preclude the city council from having a discussion at the December meeting or any other future meeting, as Mr. Isbrand suggests. And so I will try and work with Mr. Rapley to make sure that there is an item that allows a discussion of the investment policy that would include the potential qualifications or who would be eligible to be appointed as city treasurer. In the cities that I represent and have represented, the city treasurer has either been a sitting member of the governing body or a city employee, like a finance director. So it would be unusual, but it's not impossible for the city treasurer to be someone else. But in the cities I've represented, it's either been a city employee or a member of the governing body.
Thank you, Mr. Schnall. Okay, well, we have a first, we have a second. All in favor? Probably not. Mr. Paul, would you like to abstain? Abstention? Okay, I'll let the record show that Mr. Paul abstained. Thank you for your service to the city, Mr. Paul.
May I say that I strongly recommend that we don't forget that, because I know Joe mentioned that last time. We want to make sure we're doing the best we can going forward on whatever the position or whomever we have that may do that at the time, whether it be me or somebody else. You know, I agree that what the mayor says, we have to, and what Mr. Schnall said, moving forward with this current situation, hopefully we will have a need for the finance issues that we're hope to endeavor here tonight.
Well, as Mr. Schnall said, we can put an agenda item together next month and bring it forward.
Okay.
Thank you. Next up, we have discussion and possible action on resolution 2022-11-8, setting out procedures for appointment of members of the Castle Hills Economic Development Committee, appointments of a council liaison to the Castle Hills Economic Development Committee, and other matters related to the committee. Mr. Joyce.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, folks, this is, I guess, getting down to some of the administrative details of getting the committee going and getting them appointed. And essentially, what's proposed here is that we select the members of the Economic Development Committee in a very similar fashion to the way we select those from the other committees, the zoning, Board of Adjustment, Architect for Review. Very similar thing with 5 members, 2 alternates, and the usual appointment process. What's a little bit different with this is that there's 2 liaisons. One is from us, from a member of council. The other would be a staff liaison. And the reasoning behind that is that there is a staff member, at this point, it's Mr. Zamaron, who receives all of the calls from those who are looking for zoning changes or interested in moving into the city, those kinds of things, which are right up the economic development's alley. So it would seem like a coordination between that person and this committee would be essential. So as a result, then Mr. Schnall has suggested that this there be a staff liaison to accomplish that. Council liaison would be done, I guess, in a similar fashion to some of the other committees. It's a good idea. And what I would suggest at this point with respect to figuring out who these committee members are going to be is that we maybe take the rest of the year and just do some recruiting. Because it's a, this is important, and I think we need folks that are proactive. At least a couple of them need to have an understanding of business, if not business people themselves. I think we need people who understand real estate on a commercial and residential basis. So there's a number of ideal criteria, I guess we might call for the selection of these folks. And I would suggest that perhaps I could sit down with Mr. Rapley for the next few days or something and come up with a suggested criteria and then send it out if y'all don't object, and see what resumes come in, see who's interested. But in any event, all that is to say, I move that we adopt Resolution 2022-11-08, setting out procedures for the appointment of members of the Castle Hills Economic Development Committee, and as otherwise stated on the agenda item.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Mr. Joyce, a second by Mr. May. Do we have a discussion? No discussion. I would like to add that. I think this is a good idea, and hopefully we can attract new people. And I know that one of the problems that we've had in the city is there's a little bit of a vacuum in people that want to participate. So hopefully this will be a different type of committee that we can get new, fresh blood and keep up the good work, and hopefully make Mr. Zamarone's life a little bit easier as well. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. Okay, next up, we have announcements by mayor and city council members on items of community interest. Mr. Isbrand. Mr. Paul. Mr. May,
Nothing tonight, Your Honor. Mr. Mayor.
either way. Mr. Joyce.
Whoever he is. Just a quick reminder that our next mixer, the Castle Hills Business Association mixer, is Thursday evening at 5:30 at St. James Place. Love to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Ms. Daines. Okay, well,
Mayor,
yes, sir, Mr. Paul.
just council update. I'll be in touch tomorrow because we're probably going to have to schedule a couple of special city council meetings, possibly this month. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for being here with us and for taking that time away on your election day. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. May,
Mr. Mayor and Your Honor, I move that we adjourn.
do we have a second? Ms. Daines, perfect. All in favor? Unanimous at 7:03. Meeting is adjourned. Everybody have a good evening.